The South African government spent 66 billion rand on public transport infrastructure development last year and is expected to raise this to 80 billion rand by 2014. The taxi industry, seen as the backbone of the transport sector, is taking steps to inform the public about its taxi fare pricing model. Lang Mbata reports.
Minibus taxis are by far the cheapest and most popular mode of public transport in South Africa. But there's often lack of clarity regarding the factors that influence taxi fare hikes, with the volatile petrol price often thought to be the main determinant. In an effort to regulate how and when taxi fares are increased, the industry has announced it will be launching South Africa's first taxi fare index.
If we can look back at how taxes actually fares actually charged within the taxi industry. In the beginning of the industry, it was done as a social service, where, for example, a person around his neighborhood will start moving people to work at a particular fee. So from the beginning, I think how we were charging was never having a scientific method. It was only a person deciding that I've got 10 people that are moving around, at this price I'll make my petrol in a bit of profit. So firstly, I think what we are doing with the taxi fare index, we're going back and saying, how are we actually charging within the taxi industry itself?
There are currently 150,000 registered taxis on South Africa's roads who transport around 14 million commuters a day. They also account for 70,000 accidents per annum. The introduction of an index will entail accurate measuring of the costs attached to the factors considered in raising taxi fares. South Africa's National Taxi Council says the introduction of a taxi fare index can only develop the industry further.
There are really two parts to the taxi fare index. The first is in fact a cost index. What is the cost of taxi operation and how does it increase from time to time? And then that can be set against the taxi fare index. What are the fares that are currently being charged and how have they increased from time to time? And by measuring the difference between the two, there will be some kind of objective measure of whether the taxi is making money or not.
How this model will actually work is that biannual we will then have a meeting of the national leadership that will look at various factors. And we're getting some economists to be involved that will sit down and actually assess economic factors. Firstly, look at fuel prices. We look at the prices of vehicles, interest rate that we're paying on vehicles. If there are changes there, we'll actually have to realign our fares to actually match up to that. And then I think twice a year we'll come out publicly and say, this is the conditions on the ground, this is what the various issues have actually affected our fares, and then we'll actually give a determination. Now, how it currently works in terms of your fares is that associations at different levels that are running routes will actually decide on various fare increases. But then at a national level, we'll then give this index out and say everyone must try to locate himself within those particular parameters.
Taxi associations, notorious for their involvement in taxi wars over taxi routes, also compete on price. John Mnisi from the Sandton, Alexandra and Rivonia Taxi Association says an intricate process is followed before any increments are ratified.
We look at the period, the pricing. Since when did we increase the pricing? Then after that we look at the vehicle's maintenance, petrol pricing, increase of the drivers, and then so many things in the taxi industry. It's a how can we increase? And we don't just increase just because it's time to increase. We look at all those things. From there onwards, we make pamphlets, we plug them on the vehicles, and then we send the message to the commuters.
Taxi price increases can be unpredictable and not always linked to factors such as the price of petrol, service costs, insurance rates, and toll charges, which change regularly.
At the moment, there are almost no statistics about taxi operation of any kind, and certainly not about profitability and whether fares are reasonable or not, and also perhaps whether a case can be made for subsidising the taxi in the way that bus and train services are subsidised. So there could well be benefits there. It depends a great deal, of course, on how well received, well researched, well done the index process is.
Taxi safety is also poorly regulated, and associations acknowledge that there are a number of unroadworthy vehicles currently in use. Impromptu raids and safety checks are regularly conducted, which may lead to fines, but little else is being done to resolve the issue.
You cannot operate a taxi without an operating license. So therefore, I think we believe the index is only enhancing and also giving more statistical data from a financial point of view of what is happening within the taxi industry so that we can all monitor and see what's happening. But generally, in terms of taxes, we're actually compliant as a taxi industry. But I think we'll like issues like the index, and also we're looking at removing cash in terms of payments so that people can pay using cards. And that will actually give government even more control in terms of understanding the amount of cash that is moving within the taxi industry. And definitely we're willing to be a compliant industry, and therefore if there are more taxes that needs to be paid, we are there. We're actually willing to pay more taxes if it's actually required, as long as it's done within fair business practices.
The price of petrol broke through the 13 Rand level this month and is now 20% more expensive than it was 6 months ago. And while people driving their own cars have clarity over what their trip will cost, taxi commuters are still anxiously waiting for an expected hike in fares, one that could come at any time and at any price until a regulated taxi price index is implemented.